Now, amid heightened tensions in the Taiwan strait, Japanese lawmakers and the Taiwan government are forward planning on how to evacuate Japanese citizens if Taiwan's worst fear, an invasion by Beijing, ever comes true. Now, the agreement to begin talks, it was reached when a delegation of Japanese lawmakers made a trip to Taiwan in August. The cross-party group of legislators dedicated to strengthening Japan-Taiwan relations had met with Taiwan's officials such as Premier Su Tseng-chang and Foreign Minister Joseph Wu. This came weeks after Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi visited the self-ruled island. Japan has no diplomatic ties with Taiwan and cannot have direct contact with Taiwan's administration. Thus, the delegation acted in lieu of the country's government. The meetings would be used to hammer out basics regarding pre- and post-Chinese invasion-related evacuation scenarios. Now, the fears regarding China's invasion are rife in the wake of Pelosi's visit. Beijing had carried out large-scale military drills in areas encircling Taiwan in retaliation. The evacuation plan holds a lot of significance for Japan as more than 20,000 of its citizens reside in the island. Though Japan usually sends its defense aircraft to evacuate its nationals from other countries, Tokyo is uncertain whether they can land on the island, which China claims as its territory. Now, in another significant move, Japan has also planned to bolster defenses on remote islands in the East China Sea. The Ministry of Defense plans to reinforce missile and electronic warfare units stationed in the Nansei Islands, which extend from the southernmost tip here to in Kyushu, an island in Japan, to near Taiwan. Japan's stakes in the simmering Taiwan crisis are high, as Yonaguni, Japan's westernmost island, is located 110 kilometers from Taiwan, putting it on the front line of cross-state tensions. Chinese incursions in Japanese waters are not uncommon. Earlier this year in May, Chinese and Russian fighter jets carried out joint flights near Japan as leaders of the Quad bloc met in Tokyo. In June, 3 Chinese warships were seen near Japan and appeared to be sailing an unusual route around the archipelago. And amid heightened tensions in the Taiwan Strait, Japanese lawmakers and the Taiwan government are forward planning this on how to evacuate Japanese citizens if Taiwan's worst fear, an invasion by Beijing, ever comes true. This agreement to begin the talks, it was reached when a delegation of Japanese lawmakers made a trip to Taiwan back in August. The cross-party group of legislators dedicated to strengthening Japan-Taiwan relations that met with Taiwan's officials such as Premier Su Tseng-chang and Foreign Minister Joseph Wu. This comes weeks after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the self-ruled island. Japan has no diplomatic ties with Taiwan, important to mention, and cannot have direct contact with Taiwan's administration. So the delegation acted in lieu of the country's government. This meeting would be used to hammer out the basics regarding pre- and post-Chinese invasion-related evacuation scenarios. Now, the fears regarding China's invasion of Taiwan are rife in the wake of Pelosi's visit. Beijing had carried out large-scale military drills in areas encircling Taiwan in retaliation as well. This evacuation plan holds a lot of significance for Japan as more than 20,000 of its citizens reside in the island. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Thisanka Siripala is joining us from Tokyo. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as I mentioned, the meetings would be used to hammer out basics regarding pre- and post-Chinese invasion-related evacuation scenarios. What can you tell us about this?
Yes, so the Taiwan Strait is very volatile, and Japan is concerned that some of its remote islands could be caught in the crossfire between Taiwan and China. So Japan is formulating an emergency evacuation plan with Taiwan officials. So there are a few legal ambiguities that they have to hash out. For example, Japan does not have any legal any diplomatic relations with Taiwan. They severed ties with Taiwan in 1972. And so there are concerns that with China claiming ownership of Taiwan, if Japan was to send evacuation ships or aircraft, China may see this as a provocation. So it's not clear whether Japan is allowed to actually land on Taiwan.
Right, absolutely.
There are concerns that with these remote islands, Japan. So with the remote islands, which are only around 80 kilometers from Taiwan, there are concerns that that China may actually send missiles once again to the area.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to come to that. An aggressive China has put other regional players on edge as well. Tokyo, it's a difficult balancing act here. How would an evacuation plan, if at all, play out?
So Japan has been facing increasing military aggression from China. So Japan says that last month, at least 5 Chinese ballistic missiles landed in its exclusive economic zone, around 80 kilometers from one of its remote islands. And this is the first time that China has launched such a confrontation against Japan. Japan is infuriated, and China says that this is in retaliation against U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. So in reaction to this incident, Japan is changed its stance drastically on its defense budget. They're boosting its defense budget by it's doubling its GDP, so it's 2% of GDP now, which is quite a lot considering that Japan is the world's 3rd largest economy. And also the Ministry of Defense says it will be restructuring its defense capacity. There is no defense hub in the western part of Japan, so there will be formulating a new response. And there are concerns that the self-defense forces only have around 2 months worth of ammunition. And this is actually stored in Japan's northernmost island. So there is a lot of logistical reformation that needs to happen as well. And interestingly, because Japan doesn't have formal ties with Taiwan, it's not allowed to have direct contact with Taiwanese officials. So there is a group of bipartisan lawmakers that are actually liaising with Taiwanese officials and putting together this formulation. There are some political analysts that say that China could be preparing a takeover of Taiwan as soon as 2027, but Japan isn't taking any chances. It is putting together a new emergency plan as soon as possible.
All right. In fact, I was just going to come to that. You raise an interesting point. Now, Japan has also planned to bolster defenses on remote islands in East China Sea. How do you assess this, considering Japan, a pacifist state, is now putting renewed focus on bolstering defenses back at home as well?
Yeah, so Japan has a pacifist constitution. It restricts it from engaging in war. And so since this incident where China launched 5 ballistic missiles towards Japan's EEZ, there are concerns that Japan is actually widening its interpretation of its pacifist constitution. And also, since the incident, Japan says it will be procuring long-range missiles and hypersonic missiles as well, which is a stark contrast to what it says, against Article 9 of Japan's pacifist constitution, actually outlaws any use of counter-strike capabilities. And its partnership with the US, its US-Japan alliance, actually puts the US in the position of having counter-strike capabilities, and Japan takes a more defensive strategy. So this is a very drastic shift in its policy, and this all actually is sparked by increased aggression from China.
Right. Thisanka, thank you so much for joining us with all the updates on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.